Good evening. This is an incredible night. As far as the weather goes, it feels so good. It's like fall might actually be coming. But I would like to call to order our regular city council meeting for September 20th, 2021. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Dennehy, absent. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Here.
Councilmember Jaquez.
Present.
Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Councilmember Schmischer.
Here.
Councilmember B. Smith.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Here.
Mayor Smith.
Here. Thank you, council. Alicia Swearingen will be giving us our invocation from the Royal Gorge Vineyard. Let's all arise, please.
Yeah, Father, we just are so grateful. We pray your kingdom come and your will be done on earth, here in Canyon City as it is in heaven. Lord, we just acknowledge your presence and your faithfulness and your goodness to our town and our community. And we ask and invite you right now to give us wisdom. I pray and thank you so much for the families that reside here. And we ask for your favor and your blessing upon them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. The Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you again. This is now time for citizens' request to speak to City Council, and we do have a request from Douglas Klein. If we'd like to welcome you to come up to the stand, please. Cindy, can you please set the timer for 3 minutes?
Are you ready? Anyway, my name's Doug Klein. I live at 613 Griffin. I've made several phone calls to Mindy, and to Ashley. And since last week, nobody's returned my phone call. I called down here, talked to this lady over here, and I still heard nothing. So my dilemma is Griffin Avenue. Okay? We have no posted speed limits on Griffin. Okay? From one end to the other. And I know if you go into Florence, it tells you speed limit 35 and less, not posted, and then it's 25. I don't know if that's the same thing in Canyon City. Okay? So if it is, we need to do something with the speeding going on Griffin. Okay? I could put a speed bump out there or something. We used to, when we had a police officer, he'd park his car out there, when he was off duty. And that worked for a little while until they figured out he wasn't in his car. So they get up next to the car and whoop, away they go. So anyway, now we don't have him there anymore with his police car, okay? So we do have a speeding problem on Griffin. Okay, that's the first thing I want to talk about. No speed limit sign, nowhere on Griffin. And we do have kids right across the street. There's 2 families that have kids from little bitty toddlers to kindergarten, okay? The road. I can take you on mountain roads. It's better than Griffin Avenue. Several years ago, they done, I think it's like on 8th Street, before you hit the railroad track, the city went in and chip sealed it for 1 block. Okay, why they did that and didn't do anything else. And we do have commercial vehicles, heavy trailers going by to go to the industrial part, which just tears up our road. When you redone 4th Street, everything was routed up Griffin. Nobody seems to really care that we have heavy traffic on that road, okay? The other thing, I had my driveway washed out 3 times in July, okay? When we had all the heavy rains, and last year this is the 3rd time I've had to get Phil to go in there. Am I all done? I'm not done. Okay? So anyway, the problem being is all we have no drainage whatsoever. And when they redone the road up at Lincoln School, whoever engineered that had no way to drain the water. So with all the parking lot at the school that runs right in front of 6th Street, all of that water, all of the water that's asphalted in goes down 5th Street and 6th Street. So it has, and our little ditches that we got for the city, for our ditch water to irrigate with, is not adequate. So somewhere we need to come up with some drainage somehow. Because whoever engineered it at the school ran it right down the middle of the street. So I don't know what to say on that. Anyway, our ditches can't handle that much water. I mean, when it's raining like that, it's crazy. I got pictures on my cell phone. I've taken pictures of my driveway. If you want to see them, you can see them. But I'm just saying, we got a problem on Griffin due to the water in my driveway. And for whatever reason, and now I have a ditch that I've dug because everything, it has nowhere to go but into my yard because the ditch can't handle that kind of water. Okay?
All right, thank you.
So
Thank you,
anyway.
Douglas, I have a feeling we have some questions for you. But first, I want to apologize that I have not been able to return your phone call yet. I always try to return every phone call I can. Sometimes it takes a little longer than I like, but I'm glad that you came so we can address your issues
I'm sorry,
tonight.
I can't hear you.
So I'm sorry that I wasn't able to get your phone call returned sooner. But we have some questions for you. And we're going to start with Councilmember Gonzalez.
Hi, Mr. Klein, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. My question is, are we talking about Griffin between 9th and 4th Street?
Yes, we are, and we're talking about Griffin with no speed limit sign
Right, I understand.
on the other side of 4th.
Okay, so it goes past in front of the park, there's no speed limit sign?
What's that?
In front of the park, there's no speed limit sign?
I have not seen a speed limit sign,
Okay,
and I drive that road quite often.
So Ryan, I remember we did a speed study on this section of Griffin just last year. And I'm trying to remember, the results of it didn't show that the speed was overly above
Yeah,
the limits.
I don't recall, any significant changes that need to be made because of the speed study, but, we can put the speed trailer back out there, and, I can look and see what we can do regarding the speed limit signs and things like
Yeah, I
that.
think it'd be at least appropriate to put a speed limit sign in the speed
If
trailer.
you put the speed trailer up right in front of my house, there's a wide spot with a big tree, okay, it'd be a perfect place for that. Because that's about halfway at 600 block from 4th to 9th.
And we can also bring awareness to our chief. We are down a number of officers right now, so it's really difficult to have officers checking for speed violations, but we will bring this to
Well-
their attention.
They tell me they have no place to park to get them. They can park in my yard if they
Okay.
want.
Well, that's good to know, 613.
613, yeah.
And then I wanted to give you some information on the condition of the road on Griffin. You are absolutely right. It is horrible, really, really horrible. I'm not sure where it is on the list of priorities for reconstruction, but it's so bad that section you're talking about, it's so bad we can't even put chip seal on it, because that's like putting a fresh coat of paint on a house that's badly
Yeah,
chipping.
it needs to be overlaid.
It needs to be completely redone.
I retired CDOT, so I kind of know what I'm talking about. And I still work part-time at CDOT
Okay.
in the wintertime.
So let's check on that, where that is on the prioritization.
Yeah, we can, happy to check on that.
Yeah, I know next year we're prioritize, I can't say the word tonight, but North Reynolds is going to be the big project I'm not sure if there'll be room for smaller ones.
Yeah, we have a long list, but I'll check and see where we are. You know, what, a couple of other factors that go into the street reconstruction is the amount of infrastructure that needs to be done underneath the
I
street.
know that.
Yep.
I know that, but it's been too long, too many heavy trailers.
Yep.
Too many contractors going over it.
I
And
drive
it just tore the
drive
heck
it
out of
every
it.
day.
And then we don't get them patched, and when you got a little pothole, you get that rain, poop,
Yep.
bigger. Now, the other issue
The
that I would like
driveway.
to see addressed,
The driveway? The drainage into your driveway. Can we have somebody come look at that, Ryan?
I would love them to get a hold of me, and I got pictures on my phone.
We've
Yeah.
got your contact information.
Yes, you do have it,
Yes.
just give me a call. If I can, I'll be there. If not, we can set up a time when I will be
Yeah,
there.
Mr. Klein, you'll probably be getting a couple of phone calls, one from the police department and then one from our public works department.
Okay, whatever.
Yep.
But I'd like to have somebody come and look, come and sit with me. I'll even give you a beer to drink on my porch. Or
I
whatever
don't
you
know if
want, a
that's
soda
allowed, but
pop.
lemonade might
But
be
just
okay.
watch these vehicles go by. It's crazy. Thank you for your time.
We do have one more person who'd like to ask you something, and that's Councilmember Jaquez.
Well, I really don't have a question. I just want to make a comment. I think one of the reasons why the road is getting so bad is because we have a lot of activity now that we didn't used to have in the past. Off of Griffin going to the park and everything with all the other stuff in there. And I'm sure all of that leads to, because Griffin has now kind of been a main thoroughfare from 9th Street to 1st Street.
Yep.
And that's where we're having a lot of
I
problems.
agree with that. I loved it when 4th Street was shut down.
And
My
like I said,
traffic was none.
yeah, part of the problem is the fact that, you know, stuff came up that's been beneficial to the citizens
I
with things
understand
we
that.
do at the park and everything else. But that benefit has caused a little bit of a problem with
Right.
the things you're speaking
So
about.
we need to address the problem.
But anyway, they've let you know, someone will come and look at your complaints and everything else. And there are legitimate complaints, sir.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you for coming tonight, Douglas. That's why we put this first 15 minutes dedicated to citizens' comments
It's
is for
awesome.
conditions like
I
this.
overused my 3 minutes, but it was worth it.
Well, you had 3 items. You were really efficient.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have council member announcements.
No meeting Wednesday.
That's right, no regular city council meeting this Wednesday. That's because we will be having council members attending the Colorado Municipal League.
Correct.
And we also have the housing forum on Tuesday from 2 to 5 at the Annex. Canyon City is really busy this week. We are hosting both Rural Philanthropy Days for over 170 participants and COMOM, which treats about 1,000 patients and gives $1 million worth of free dental work. And so it's a big week for Canyon City hosting some pretty awesome things. We are now moving on to item 8, and that is the consent agenda. Ryan, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Item 8A is to approve the minutes for the regular city council meeting on September 7th, the general government meeting on September 8th, and the special council meeting on August 24th regarding the rec district. 8B authorizes the mayor to appoint David Bonogovsky to the Board of Adjustments. 8C authorizes the mayor to accept the resignation of Rochelle Ryder from the Canyon City Historic Preservation Commission. 8D is to authorize, it says mayor on the agenda, it should be city administrator, to sign a master agreement for services with Stantec Consulting for the EPA Brownfield Multipurpose Grant. 8E is to ratify the city administrator's signature on the agreement for KRW Associates for the Public Works Director position. 8F declares surplus and approved disposal of the 1977 John Deere 2040 tractor. 8G is the monthly budget summary for July of 2021, and 8H is cash disbursements and P-card disbursements.
Okay, City Council, any questions? Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a couple of questions. First off, on the master agreement for services with Stantec Consulting. I was wondering if you could shed a little bit more light on how the city will determine what priority projects will be selected under tasks 3 and 4 for phase 1 and phase 2.
Yeah, and we've got Rick Harmon, our Economic Development Manager and Project Manager for the Brownfield Grants, and we'll let Rick talk about that.
Hi there. The Brownfield Grant is one that's available to us for whatever projects we determine that the EPA agrees with in the future. So for the next 5 years, under Task 2 of the plan, any brownfield property or any property that we'd like to designate as a brownfield site, and there were some that we had in mind when we applied for the grant, but they'll go through a Brownfield Advisory Committee review and a City Council review, and then selected after that for Phase 1 and Phase 2. It's kind of a funky grant because they award you the money knowing that you've got some possibilities, but we can really determine that later on and then change the program basically to match.
And it's, you know, it's an $800,000 grant, which sounds like a lot, but when you start getting into brownfield projects, that money can
Yeah.
disappear very quickly.
Goes away fast.
Absolutely. I think it's phenomenal that the city had the foresight to secure this grant using, it sounds like some very creative methodology. And thank you for clarifying that although the work plan doesn't yet specify what those priority projects would be, the Brownfield Advisory Committee and City Council will have a chance to weigh in on those.
Correct. All we provided
prioritizations.
with them, for them, really was areas we were interested in. They were interested, EPA was interested in downtown, they were interested in Riverfront. They were familiar with our Skyline Steel property already, as was Stantec, and they were very familiar with Stantec's projects here prior. So they knew that we had Skyline Steel as a possibility. They knew Black Hills potentially could have been a possibility. They knew that we had potential development along the riverfront, possibly in the future. And they knew about some opportunities on Main Street and St. Scholastica. And those are really the areas that we focused our attention for the grant, and that's what EPA is leaning toward. So anything that we look for should be primarily in those areas, but if something else comes up too, we are more than able to include it, at least make the request to the EPA for it.
Could you also clarify whether properties need to be city-owned or don't need to be city-owned, or does it depend on what phase of the project it's under?
It depends on the phase. Phase ones, that can be, we can initiate a phase 1 on behalf of a separate owner, a private owner, but if it's a phase 2 property, we need to own it. We need to own it, or excuse me, no, phase 2, no, cleanup.
Cleanup, yeah,
we need to
Remediate
own.
task 4.
Remediation, we need to own it. And in the case of, let's say, Black Hills, if we end up in a relationship with them where we are leasing the property from them, and we wanted to use our brownfield money to clean that up, we would have to take possession temporarily to do that. So that makes it a little more complicated when it comes down to cleaning up property.
Okay, so just to clarify, Phase 1 and Phase 2, it could be city-owned or privately owned as long as
Correct.
we're doing it on their behalf, but then for cleanup, it would need to be owned by the city.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And any properties before we spent funding on this for them would go before that community advisory group and before City Council?
Yeah, we've got a few, well, we'll have to determine that, I guess, in the procedures there. The EPA is really the major approval. We've already discussed Skyline Steel, New Method Laundry, St. Scholastica, and that being the Cabrini Building. I guess to the extent we determine priorities and to the extent that City Council is notified, I guess I'm not certain of that, how we want to handle that.
Yeah, I think, we have the draft work plan. We'd probably want to bring, a final work plan before City Council, and then just allow staff to work based off of that work plan, rather than having to come back for every single project.
One of the issues is, let's say we need to get something assessed quickly. And we were kind of under that time frame with the Cabrini Building, but that now is going in another direction. Sometimes we need to be able to move pretty quickly on items, and that would have been a smaller item. So we'll be discussing those
I guess
possibilities.
where I'd like a little bit more clarity then is just what rubric the city will be using to determine those priorities, understanding that you have to act quickly and also understanding that 800,000 doesn't go very far with Brownfield. If they won't be coming before the Brownfield Advisory Committee and City Council to determine which projects we'll be spending funding on, I'd just like to get a better sense of what prioritization rubric or methodology you'll be using.
Why don't I discuss that with Dave Laney from Stantec to see what other communities have done with a multipurpose? This is a different type of a grant. Not many organizations or not many communities get these grants. So I'll run that by him and report back if that works. Or have the administrator report back or something.
That would be great, thanks.
Sure.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
So just jumping in on those questions right there, I think number one, in terms of priorities, what we're interested in as a council, I believe, is being able to use EPA money to offset monies that otherwise we would have to spend. So that, anything there is going to be, any project that we have in that regard is going to be to our benefit. And so there's not really much question when it comes to priority and those types of questions. But in terms of property acquisition, absolutely, every piece of property comes before City Council before acquisition. So if we're aware if there's a phase 1 or phase 2 on that property, and we're aware that there may be some remediation needed, we'll know that as we make the decision for it to purchase or not, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. My thought was just if we're spending money at phase 1 and phase 2 as city council, or not as city council, as the city is determining whether or not we might wish to pursue purchase of a property, it would be helpful to know how they're planning to prioritize the spending of those funds, understanding that we would like these funds to mostly offset what would otherwise be city expenses. But that clarification definitely helps. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, and as Rick mentioned, part of the reason we applied for the grant funds in the beginning, and this aligns with the master plan actually, is trying to do those evaluations again along the river and downtown to help with that revitalization effort.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
So along these same lines with this grant money, we've started trying to do, what is that report we're trying to get from the property at New Method?
The New Method, it's the phase 2 analysis.
Phase 2
Phase
analysis,
2.
yeah.
So now, with that, how can this be integrated into what we've got going on with that?
So we'll get that phase 2 analysis, hopefully we have some of those results already.
We have some of the data. We don't
Yeah.
have the report that summarizes it or explains what we need to do next.
So if the city were to acquire the property and there was remediation that needed to be done, we could use some of that Brownfield grant to do help
Okay.
with the remediation.
That was my question, is it started prior to this, so I wondered if that could still be backed up and used in
Yeah.
conjunction with that project.
Yeah, because we have not acquired the property yet. The EPA wants to make sure that you do all appropriate inquiry or phase 1, phase 2 before you acquire a property, and that is the due diligence phase that we're in right now.
Okay, and when will that report?
I'm expecting any day,
Okay, great.
any day.
Yeah, we've started to see some of those results from the ground monitoring wells.
Good,
How's it looking so far?
yeah.
Like on a scale from 1 to
Curious.
5, how scared do we need to be?
It's
Not
tough to
as scared as I thought we were going to be.
Yeah, it doesn't look as bad as we thought it could, but we really don't know. I mean, if they found something in one monitoring well, and we know they did, are they going to drill more? Or we really don't know what the next step is. And if it's under paved roads, it's already sealed, does it really matter? I guess we don't know that right now.
And can I ask one more question about that? And this is just out of curiosity, because I know the boiler in that building is enormous. It's probably as big as my house. Can that help clean that up? This grant money, can it help clean that up, or?
I don't know that it could help clean that up unless it was wrapped in asbestos or something.
Oh, I see.
So it,
Yeah, I don't know.
and,
So it has
And it
to
would-
remediate actual contamination.
Okay.
yeah, it would
Yeah.
only remediate the asbestos. It wouldn't do anything to move the boiler out.
And we haven't heard anything about
there was.
asbestos or lead-based paint in the building. We just received some groundwater, or excuse me, monitoring well results. So,
Okay, Councilmember Hawkes?
I've got one's a question and one's a comment. One's a question and one's a comment. Is there a deadline for using that $800,000?
5 years,
Okay, all right.
yeah.
And my next concern is going to be this, 5 years can go by pretty quick in a sense. And I don't want to rush, the administrator or you guys, anything in there, but I think it's very important that you folks can kind of come up with something as soon as you can with regards to the outlook. That's what we're looking at, because once again, it's going to come back to city council to look at the money. And then to prioritize that, where we want to spend the money and everything else, because like I say, $800,000 isn't going to go very far. And so when we get to the point where we say, this is number one with regards to the money, then what we have to start looking at is, are we going to have money in our bank account somewhere down the roadway to help take care of the other projects that are also essential and important to the growth of Canyon City?
Right. The work plan that you received in your packets was really a plan that was created by the consultants in order to receive the grant. It was not anything that is set in stone, so yeah, our next step, once we get through this phase, is to sit down with the consultants, put together the Brownfield Advisory Committee, and start talking about priorities. And you're absolutely right. I mean, if there's brownfield work that's going to have to be done on property, there's probably other work as well that will have to be paid for, so.
And we do want to show early success to the EPA because that increases our likelihood of getting funding in the future.
I think that also confirms the necessity to have a specialist implement this grant that's highly specialized from the federal government. That's very complicated. We want it to be used efficiently and as professionally as we can. So
And when I was
I hope that,
in my conversations with Greg Davis from the EPA, he asked me if we had a consulting firm working with us, and I told him Stantec, and he was very happy to hear that. So
that's good to know.
Stantec did a very nice job with the coalition grant over the last 3 years in our community. So they're very good at what they do, and they're very familiar with our assets, we'll call them assets, and our potential for redevelopment. And the EPA, of course, is aware of our potential for redevelopment too, and they're very interested in making this work out well.
Great. We did see that this is a little bit behind schedule, and it shows an anticipated completion date in August of 2023. Do we see that completion date would be pushed back as well? Because that's still a good 2 years before maybe we could even see development happen at some of these key properties like Skyline Still. I'm just wondering what timeline you're anticipating.
Well, we could begin, well, let's put it in terms of the Cabrini Building. Cabrini Building wasn't a consideration when we applied for the grant. It came up later because Unbridled was running into some financing concerns and thinking maybe they could work on the Cabrini Building, get that done first, and then put the equity toward the hotel. The EPA had no problem with us starting as early as we possibly could. They would backdate the agreement. So any changes that we need to make from this point forward will be reflected in the work plan and the schedules, and that won't be an issue at all.
How
I still
soon-
anticipate 5
Okay.
years for the entire grant.
For the type thing. How soon do you think we'll be able to start our assessments, studies, and surveys for Skyline Still?
I'd say that probably early next year at the soonest, at this point.
Okay.
I mean, we can obviously make that a priority, and see where we can slot that in, I think it's obviously a priority, and Stantec knows that.
Yeah, I imagine for city council, that is a pretty high priority. And what kind of contamination are you expecting or anticipating to find at the Skyline Still property?
We already have, the phase 2 was done on that. There's not a lot. I have not seen the full report. but I know there's not a lot of contamination there. We have to put some money into asbestos for taking down the buildings that are there, but I think that was under a totally different brownfield agreement.
Okay.
So I don't know specifically what's there. It's been a while since I looked at the report, and I don't recall what it was.
Okay.
But
Ryan,
there
did you have
wasn't a
something to
lot.
add?
You know, trying to think back to the report, because it's been a while since I've reviewed it. I think there may have been some oil contamination that we were looking at one little spot. But other than that, as Rick said, I believe for the most part, it's a fairly clean site.
Well, that's good to know, especially because by the time we're done with our surveys, it's looking like for remediation and implementation, we're only going to have $354,000 left. And I have a feeling that's not going to go very far. I'm just wondering if through your conversations, if there's been any talk of how realistically how many projects we could actually get done with that money.
No, not really, because it really depends on the project. You know, if we have to put money into, let's say we buy New Method and we have to put money into it, that could take a lot. You know, it really depends on the project. That's why it's kind of an open grant.
Okay.
Skyline Steel, from my conversations with Stantec, it doesn't have a lot, so they say that's not going to take a lot to do it. And if there were any movement of Acorn Petroleum would take care of their own. They have a fund available to clean that up, so we really don't have to worry about that at all. I say that knocking on wood because, you know, things always come up that you never really expect, but
Always.
always do. But they assure me that they have funds, they put money into a fund that they can use to clean it up if they need to. When we did the sewer line for Skyline Steel over to the ice house, there was no discoloration, nothing found in the soil between Acorn, between Skyline and the river.
Okay.
So that's all very good. And there was a lot of looking to see if there was, because there was a phase 2 done on that property. So, you know, I can verify, talk to Dave Laney some more. First time I met him, actually, he was doing the phase 2 on Skyline, so I'm sure he'll have a very good
I'd just
memory.
be very interested in that.
Yeah, I can get some clarification on how much he thinks is really there.
And just as a side note, when taking down those buildings, someone brought to my attention, who apparently is familiar with those buildings, that inside some of those is a lot of really old lumber and just like brackets and other things that are considered to be very valuable right now. And there might be some opportunities for getting some money
I'll
back out of
take
those
a look.
buildings.
I went in there. I just don't recall seeing anything, but I'll take a look.
Okay, even, I think some of it was also just integrated in the building itself.
Oh.
Yeah, because it's very old and considered kind of a prize to be able to
All right.
get some of that.
We'll be
Are-
careful of that.
Are there any other questions? Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Not a question, but I just wanted to say thank you for the graphs on revenue. They're greatly appreciated. It really makes it a lot easier to see the city's position in terms of how things are going on during the year. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Smisher?
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks so much, Mr. Harmon, for your responses. I did also have a question on the 8E, the Public Works Director position. Now that we've been with KRW Associates for about a month working on this position, I was just hoping you could give us an update.
Yeah, so KRW is continuing to do the recruitment. They have posted the job to several key job boards, American Public Works Association, American Water Works Association, as well as several others. Ivy and I met with them last week. We did not have an applicant at that point. There has been some communication since. It does sound like we have at least one applicant so far. The job is currently scheduled to close on Friday, but depending on how many applicants we have, we may be pushing that out a couple of weeks to see what the applicant pool does. Recruiting overall has been challenging, especially when it comes to engineering and public works types of positions. And, we're just continuing to work that process and meeting with the consultants to make sure that they are doing what they can to get us some qualified applicants.
Brandon from NIT, our subtitles are frozen. I don't know if there's something we can do with it. All right, are we back on Facebook Live? Awesome. Thank you for accommodating us, Brandon from IT, very much. We were discussing item 8E, and that was the agreement for getting the Public Works Director position. Amy, was your answer adequately given for your question?
Yes, thank you so much, Rick, thank you so much, Ryan. Really appreciate what you guys are doing to try to work with the consultants and ensure that we're getting as many qualified applicants as possible. I really do hope, because you've gone the extra mile to enlist this consulting firm, that we do get a more robust response than just one applicant.
Yeah,
But I know how tight the labor market is right now and how hard it is to find those elusive professional engineers. So thank you for your work on that.
Just as a anecdote to this issue of getting professional engineers, last week, both Mayor Pro Tem and I attended this district CML meeting, and Amy was there as well. And afterwards, we were able to talk to one of the larger engineering firms that services Southern Colorado, and they have an unprecedented over 30 openings for certified engineers. That is a lot. And so they used to get like over 100 applications just for one opening, and now they are making major compromises in hiring just because they are so desperate for getting people on. And so I'm really hoping that this firm will be able to get us a quality applicant to serve us. I know they served us well for getting our police chief, and under the circumstances, I hope it goes well for our engineering for public works position as well. Are there any other questions from City Council on the consent agenda? Then I would like to entertain a motion. Looks like Councilman Smith will do that. I would remind you to amend item 8D, that the city administrator will sign the master agreement.
Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve the consent agenda, amending item 8B, 8D, excuse me, authorizing the city administrator to sign the master agreement for services to Stantec Consulting Services for EPA Brownfield multipurpose grants.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll call a vote.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Schmisher?
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Thank you, council. Ryan, would you like to offer an administrator's report?
Yes, ma'am. Louise Barton, who volunteers with the Lakeside Cemetery, is organizing a staff appreciation picnic this Friday at 11 a.m. and wanted to extend an invitation to the mayor and council as well. So, that invitation is open. I have a topic here regarding recruitment. Obviously, we've talked about the Public Works Director position. We are working on filling several openings right now. We have 8 openings within the city, and some of those positions have multiple openings, such as police department or police officer. We're interviewing water superintendent. Interviews are happening this week. Civil engineer interviews will happen next week. The Small Business and Main Street Program Manager interviews will also happen next week. And then our utility locate position interviews are happening next week. The Orchard Avenue project, phase 1 of that project is complete, and I'm sorry, I forgot to write down the cross street to where that is up to. But that, they'll be doing striping this week, and that will complete phase 1. There's a few minor punch list items. We still have, on the north end of Orchard, phase 2, we still have some delays going on there. That work will continue probably through the month of October and possibly into the first week of November. So
Wow, that's already taken forever.
it is. We had some design issues on the irrigation line up on the north end of the project, so that has certainly caused some delays as far as Phase 2 goes. World's End Brewing, they'll be installing a fire suppression system for their expanding business. They've expanded into the storefront next to them, which is, it's great to see a business thriving like that. Expect to see some construction activity on Main Street this week as they tap into the water line. That'll be happening Wednesday. I know it's not ideal for Rural Philanthropy Days, but they had booked this vendor out to do the work a few months ago, I believe.
Our business is being notified, because when I did my Main Street visits, that was a really big deal that they get proper notification of
Yeah, I will
Main Street
double-
closures.
Yeah, I will double check and make sure that those notifications have gone out, but yeah, absolutely. Water distribution team is working on fixing some water pressure issues up in, one specific zone up in Dawson Ranch. It's been a problem for many years, an ongoing issue. We're working very closely with the homeowners up there to make those changes, and hopefully this will be a solution that will alleviate that problem they've had for quite some time. And then also, as previously mentioned, Rural Philanthropy Days and Colorado Municipal League are both happening this week. Happy to take any questions.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Thank you, Ryan, for your update. I just had a couple of questions on some other follow-up. How are we moving forward with code enforcement?
Yeah, that should have been part of the update as well. We have a code enforcement supervisor that started today.
Great.
And then we have another code enforcement officer that I believe is starting Wednesday. We were waiting on some background, but that should help quite a bit. Two of those officers, and we also have a temporary officer that I don't have a start date yet, but I believe an offer was imminent. Those three, the supervisor, the code enforcement officer, and the temporary, will all be going to a code training in the middle of October to help get them up to speed.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I want to say thank you. Little request I had a while back was to make sure that the construction signs weren't sitting right at an intersection where you couldn't see around them to make a right or a left-hand turn. And I've noticed that has been corrected, so I want to say thank you.
Absolutely. If anybody sees those, please let me know. If it's
Yeah.
blocking the view, please let me know so we can address those.
Yep, thanks.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Smith?
I just had a question about the interviews that are coming up. Are all those jobs closed at this time, or are they still open?
So we have a couple of those. The civil engineer, the Main Street program manager position, those are open until filled. I believe the utility locate position, water superintendent position, both of those, I believe, have those closed last week.
Awesome, thank you.
And
Councilmember-
police officer is always open.
Councilmember Hawkes?
My question is going to be, because you said some of the new code enforcement people that we're going to hire are still having to go through some training. For the audience out there that's been so concerned with regards to my comment last time we had a meeting with regards to Canyon City going from Tree City, USA to Weed City, USA, how many actual code enforcement officers do we have present that can do the job that is required for the code enforcement
Before these hirings,
before the new hires?
we have one code enforcement officer that's been on the job for 3 months.
Okay, and the reason I ask this question is because those people that are watching the meeting and stuff like that, that are concerned with, what's happening in the town, have an idea of where we stand with regards to, I guess we can say the delays. The weeds don't take a delay, but everything else sometimes does. So I hope they understand that we're pushed to our limits right now of what we can do with what we have, but we want you to know that we're taking steps to try to help that problem get resolved a lot sooner than that. So I appreciate the fact that, we're getting applications and getting some people trained, so hopefully we can get things back on the right path. Thank you.
And, you know, one of the folks that we're hiring is a previous code enforcement officer with the city, knows the city, knows the rules, will be able to hit the ground running.
That's great news. Any other questions from council? All right, then we'll go ahead and move on to item 10A, and that's the cost allocation plan update.
And for that presentation, we have Finance Director Tammy Nordyke.
So I don't actually have a presentation prepared for you tonight. Just discuss the cost allocation plan that was submitted. We did engage MGT Consulting to perform the 2019 cost allocation plan. We did actually start this in 2020, and we had some delays, and so that's why we're just getting it now. MGT performed our cost allocation plan for 2018, and then, of course, most recently for 2019. Prior to that, it had been performed by the chief accountant, who has since retired from the city. The 2018 cost allocation plan was based on budgeted figures, where the 2019 cost allocation plan is based on actual figures. So we want to make sure to point that out. So when you're looking at the amount the transfers will be budgeted for 2022, there's going to be a difference. And it's primarily because when you base the allocation on budget versus actual, typically actuals come in lower than budget. And then, so that's the highlights of the 2019 cost allocation plan. Does anybody have any questions about the plan?
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So when MGT is doing the allocation, what is the yardstick they're using to allocate between different activities and departments?
It depends on the department and the activity. Some of them, it is based on FTEs. Some of it is based on, like, for our depreciation and those type of things, it's based on square footage of buildings. The vehicles, it's the number of vehicles assigned to those areas. So it depends on what we're looking at. In the plan, it does talk about some of those items that are used, and when you flip through some of those pages, it would say how it is allocated. There was a question on why the subscriptions, membership fees in non-departmental were allocated 100% to City Council. What happened was that initially was put in City Council and then allocated across all other departments and funds. So it needed a place to start, because our non-departmental is basically where it's costs that apply to the entire city. And so and then we looked at that and assigned it to the various areas.
So when you have an FTE that works maybe in a couple of different departments or areas, is it MTG that does the so they're going to be allocated in a couple of different places. Say we have an FTE that's going to be allocated in a couple of different places. Who is making the decision? What are they using to make the decision where the allocation falls?
So what happens is MGT sends finance a list of questions for each department, and then finance works with that department to determine how those allocations should be. For instance, in finance, they ask, how much, what percentage of your time is working with accounts payable? What is working with payroll? Or, those various main functions of the department. And so they use our data, what we say is our percentage, to come up with the allocations. And they do that. So engineering is a good one in streets. They want to know how much time is spent, doing potholes or snow removal or storm repair. And those are the type of activities that we have to provide back to MGT.
And is the accounting department the focus of that? I mean, does all the information flow through you? And what I'm getting at is that the information has to start with the people actually doing the work and say, well, I spend this much time over here or over there or wherever. And then they give that to you, and then you collate that and give that to MTG. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, here's the real question. Are we going to see 2 stormwater departments in this allocation? Are we going to see a allocation for where we spend monies on complying with our state permit versus all the other monies that we spend? Since it's based on questions that we give staff that you then collate that information to give to them, is there any reason why we cannot do that for this allocation coming up?
We do not specifically identify in our line item how much is related to what is mandated, other than we could say that essentially everything we do under stormwater is mandated by.
No, that is not correct. I'm sorry.
Except I guess the projects we're doing to help.
There's 2 different kinds of stormwater the city deals with. One is complying with the permit issued by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and the other is dealing with quantity issues for stormwater. Those are activities like our vacuum truck. That is 100% allocated to the quantity issues. Okay, we have a person that manages stormwater permits that we issue to the different businesses and construction activities that happen within the city. That is a compliance. That's a compliance side of it, and so it's perhaps there's some information that can help you decide those differences. There is a difference between monies we spend on compliance with our permit versus all the other monies, which are basically quantity driven. And so my question is, are the allocators, if we want to call them that, going to be given the information so that we have a compliance number for our stormwater expenditures and then basically all the rest?
I will have to look at the questionnaire that they provide us to see what all they're asking in that, and if there is anything else we can identify. The next plan that we're looking at doing is for our actuals for fiscal year 2020. We put in place our crew to do the cleanings of all of our stormwater system in 2021. And so that amount of time that group is spending doing cleaning and maintenance won't be reflected until later.
Sure.
In our 2020, our streets department was still doing part of that. We do have cartograph available, which I think 2020 would have been the first full year we'd be able to get those hours, where before it wasn't, we didn't have as easy of way to track the data.
Thank you. And I just want to say that absent a pretty rock solid commitment from the city to make sure that we have 2 allocation centers for stormwater, I'm prepared to vote against this tonight. Thank you.
So, Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick, just one point, the allocation is, at least how it's been done in the past, is based on fund, not necessarily dividing activities within the fund. So with, future allocation plans, that could be something that we can ask them to see how much it would cost to add that particular feature or that additional work into an allocation plan, if that makes sense.
So right now, the bid that we have is just based on allocating all stormwater to the stormwater department.
Correct. It's based on getting the correct allocations for each of the different funds.
That's what they've bid on.
Correct.
And essentially what it is to see what costs that are accounted for in general fund, let's say finance, that actually benefits the entire city, are attributed to those other funds. And that's when we get our help, that's what helps us determine what our operating transfer from those funds back to general fund is. That is what we primarily use this cost allocation plan for.
So just for a point of conversation, right now we are on AI, and that's just to receive and file the cost allocation plan for 2019, and we will vote on that. And then for item 2, then the vote will be on the agreement for 2020's cost allocation.
Correct.
So then based on that, thank you for that, Madam Mayor. Based on that, I'm taking a minute here to look at Annex 1.
While you're looking, I will back up Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick in that having those 2 different cost allocations for stormwater has been very high on his priority list and something that he's very passionate about, and that I can see his reasoning for that, for the going into the future. And while you're looking, we have some other council members that would like a question as well. We'll start with Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could I just ask what the vision for the future is? Is the intention to eventually transfer this back in-house to the city, or is the intention to continue contracting this out every year?
At this time, we do not have the staff on board that can do this at this point. We did, like I said, we did have a chief accountant that had retired. That was prior to me starting. And then we ended up having 3 accounting managers. Right now, we have 2 accounting managers, and one of them has given their notice. And so in order to keep us moving forward, we want to go ahead and get the 2020 plan done. But when we're looking at hiring our new accounting manager, we are going to be looking for a skill set that matches more closely to the chief accountant to be able to bring some items back in-house.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
I was just wanting to ask some clarifying questions, but John cleared those up. I was failing to understand where his discrepancy was, but I understand now. Thank you.
Okay. Just for the benefit of the public, I would just like to give a little bit of background information why the cost allocation is so important, and especially since this is the first time we've hired an outside firm to do this allocation. And it's that we have different enterprises. For example, for the water fund, everything that the water fund gains and revenues for their services must stay within the water department. And so we can't use water department water fees to pay for general budget expenses. That would be a horrible, unethical thing to do. And so this guarantees that that doesn't happen. But on the other side, we should not be using general funds to help offset costs to the water department. And we had, obviously, as before, we have particular interest in making sure the stormwater fees are used within stormwater, and even within then, that is between what's required by the federal government from the EPA and the MSFR permit versus what we choose to use for enterprise funds. And then that is kept independent, and that each of our departments is kept in their appropriate budget lane. And so this is a very important part of the budgeting process and accountability. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Speaking of the budget, if you look at page 6 of 105 of the report, when we are preparing our 2022 budget, right now, we will be using the $418,898 as the operating transfer from water to general fund. And then we will be using the $521,522 from stormwater to general fund. If we are able to get the plan submitted, the new one completed before the end of the year, those figures would change, or I'm assuming will change, just because we would be basing our transfer, our operating transfer from 2019 expenses versus 2020, and we're going to be doing our 2022 budget, so it would be a little closer if we used our 2020s. But I just wanted to point that out. And one item, if you do look at your 2020 budget, the operating transfer from stormwater to general fund, if I recall correctly, is slightly over $700,000. So this is significant that we did this, and we based it on actuals and not budget.
Are there any other questions pertaining to the receiving and the file cost allocation plan for 2019?
So I have an additional comment.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in looking at Annex 1, as I understand it, basically they do the allocation plan using their professional experience, but using the essentially the templates that we provide them and the information that we provide them, wherein they conduct a meeting, collect basic financial and operational data, conduct department interviews, and develop a cost structure. So it seems to me that we can tell them we're going to have two stormwater departments in this cost allocation plan. One that collects costs for our compliance with our state permit and the EPA permit, and one that collects, and the remaining costs then are allocated to stormwater. It can be stormwater general or stormwater water quality. But as I understand this, we can tell them what we want. And so it's only up to us, it's only our, a desire to do it is it can drive the project. So I still am to where I am going to vote no unless I have a firm commitment that we're going to see two stormwater departments in this cost allocation plan, one for permit compliance and the other to collect all other costs. Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, just for my own edification, since this is my first time looking at this, do you mean that you will vote no on accepting the 2019?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Just on awarding the contract.
Okay, so is there any more discussion for the 2019 plan? Then I would like to call for a motion in a second. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Madam Mayor and Council, I move that we receive and file cost allocation plan for year 2019, and that's it for that one.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll call a vote, please.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Schmischer?
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Thank you, Council. I will take this time to notice that our Closed captioning, again, is frozen, and we did not used to have this problem all the time. It's just been the last 2 weeks. And it is, okay, we're back on again.
Oh, good.
Okay, so this is of extreme importance that we have this closed captioning for the hearing impaired. Luckily, we don't have to reboot again, but let's keep a close look on this. Since it's working again, let's move on to item A2, and that's to authorize the city administrator to sign a consulting services agreement for the year 2020 for the cost allocation plan.
Before council, you do have the agreement with MGT Consulting to perform our 2020 cost allocation plan. As Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick brought up as concern, I can request that we modify our questions for the stormwater to include compliance with our MS4. And that data that we get back will have to be from our engineering department, our stormwater department, but I can ask them to do that. It would just be one more column in the plan. I do not think that it should change our cost.
I agree with everything you said. Thank you for that very much.
Any more discussion from council? I'd like to entertain a motion in a second.
Do we need to amend?
Well, we need to amend that, or is that?
That will be just when they send me the questionnaires to send out to the departments, I'll make sure that we have that.
Okay, so we have our firm commitment from our finance director on public record. So
Yes.
thank you. I would like to entertain a motion then.
I'll make a motion.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Madam Mayor, I move that we authorize the city administrator to sign a consulting services agreement for fiscal year 2020 for the cost allocation plan.
Second.
Ooh, a motion and a fast second. Any discussion? I'll call a vote.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Schmisher?
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Thank you, council. Thank you, Tammy Wagner, very much.
Thank you.
We are now on item 10B. This is the introduction and adoption by title only of Resolution 2022, Series of 2021, entitled, "A Resolution of the City of Canyon City, Colorado, accepting a petition for annexation and establishing November 1st, 2021 as the date of public hearing on the requested annexation of a parcel of land located in unincorporated Fremont County. This is the Javernick Annexation Number 1. Patrick Mulready.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. You may remember that earlier this year, the fire district annexed a piece of property on East Main Street just to the west of the BLM offices. We are now in possession of a set of petitions to annex the property just to the east of the BLM offices, also on East Main. The resolution before you this evening would start that process officially in concurrence with state statute. What happens here is that you accept the petitions and schedule a formal hearing for the annexation request. That formal hearing has to be between 45 and 60 days from today. And what this does is give the zoning component of the annexation time to go to Planning Commission. Planning Commission can conduct a hearing on that that zoning request, and the zoning will then catch up with the annexation when it comes to council on November 1st. So we are recommending that you approve Resolution 22 so that the ball will start rolling on the annexation process.
Any discussion from council? Councilmember Schmisher.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for clarification's sake, is this property within the priority annexation area?
It is both within the city's future growth area, and it is part of the priority annexation area, in both the old comprehensive plan and the new one.
Thank you.
Very good. Would anyone like to make a motion? Councilmember Smith.
Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve Resolution 22, Series of 2021.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call a vote.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Schmisher?
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
Thank you, council. Thank you, Patrick Mulready, very much. It is now time for item number 11, and that is to go into executive session to consider personnel matters regarding the city administrator's evaluation process.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Madam Mayor and council, I move that city council enter into executive sessions for the following purposes. An executive session to consider personnel matters regarding the city administrator's evaluation process pursuant to CRS 24-6-4024F.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call a vote.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilmember Jaquez.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Schmisher.
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
All right, we will probably just take a quick little break for council to get a drink, and
We're going to assemble in the
And-
chambers and
we're moving into the antechamber. All right, sounds good.